Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to get back in the saddle and actually do some painting. Hooray! Now I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. I'm thinking I might do something different with Fridays from now on, make it kind of maybe a mailbag or a frequently asked questions sort of thing. But there are a couple of things here that I've wanted to demonstrate for a little bit, and it seemed like it'd be a good opportunity just to have some fun painting. So this one's going to be a little bit different. It's not a straight up tutorial like some of the others that I've done. If you might remember the Skaven Warlord I painted, where it was a little bit more just having a chat and me talking incessantly to the camera like I am now. And if you want to paint along, I guarantee there'll be one or two things you might find interesting here. Now, first thing I wanted to demonstrate is this little doodad here, this suspicious pistol grip looking thingamajigger. Now, I got contacted by the guys at Redgrass Games, and they asked me if I'd be interested in having a go with one of their prototype, painting handles. Now, they said, please, the reason why I emphasize prototype is they said, please don't judge it based on how it looks. This is a 3D printed test of concept, and you can hear a little bit of the texture. But the concept itself, when I pulled it out of the bag, is actually quite interesting, in that it has got that slight curvature to it, so it fits in your hand thus. And on the top here, it turns. And I had a peek underneath. I don't want to pull it apart to get an idea of how it works. I don't want to break the thing to find out its innards. But it's got a little metal, like a screw head or something in there, where I can move this very easily with my thumb. But it's actually quite stiff. So while you're painting with it, you're not going to have any issues with whatever's sitting on top. Then they've got this gummy stuff. It's really just blue tack, and it's got a textured surface underneath, so if you need to pull that out and replace it with your own blue tack, jobs are good and it'll stick to something. So I'm actually fairly impressed. Like, even if this is a prototype and it's not going to look like this when you get your hands on it, okay, this ticks a few boxes. If I'm honest, I would like it to be just a little bit bigger. I'm a tall bloke, I've got big hands, and not a lot of places tend to think of just a little, like half an inch more would be nice. If they are taking suggestions, you guys are watching, maybe offer a different size handle too. I don't mind paying a premium for something that'll be more comfortable, but this actually does the business. So with that, let's have a play around and we'll see what we do with a model on the top of it. Now, speaking of models, today I'm going to paint a Skitarii Ranger in the colours of Mars. Now, you might be pointing out I've already done that, and I have. But I want to do one slightly differently. I've been looking at ways of speed painting these guys, getting them to the table as fast as I can. I've got a project coming up. You might have seen it linked before, Tales of More Warlords, which is happening over on Twitter and basically anywhere else you want to make use of the hashtag. And it's going to be a hobby project coming into, the first couple of months of 2018. So 2019, goodness me, we're living in the future. So I want a way that I can get a Skitarii army to the table fast as. So as a quick look, this should be what our finished product looks like. Now, you might see if I tip him back there, you can see there's some brown still under his cape and all that carry on, but that is not going to matter. What we're focusing on is techniques that are going to get him on the tabletop looking pretty cool. And frankly, I don't think that's too bad. I'm quite pleased with how that turned out, if I'm honest. So speed painting doesn't have to be ugly. Now, the reason why I'm doing it with them already stuck to his base is that if you are like me and you tend to be the bull in the china shop, you may find you've already stuck all your Skitarii together and you haven't thought about, multi-part basing and all that carry on to get to the back of the cape. But we're going to cover that now. So, without any further mucking around, let's get some brushes and some paints on. Now, to start off with, I'm actually not going to put them on the handle just yet, and that's because I want to be able to tip them up and hold them by the miniature. So, I've got here my Rakarth Flesh and a medium base brush, because I like the width of the brush for this. And all you're going to do is just attack it from multiple angles and get the inside of the cape as best you can. Don't worry if there's any areas that you're going to miss or you sort of splash over. All you want to make sure is that the most prominent visible areas are this color. Okay, You may find you want to go back and do a second coat, but if you're not too generous with the old the water in the first place, you can find you can skip that bit. Like I said, this is really a bit more on the battle ready side than it is sort of, presentation, but honestly, if you're painting an army, not everybody needs to look perfect. So you see I'm turning them all sorts of directions, to see if I can find a way to get the brush in, and it's not too hard. Now once that's dry, we're going to do exactly the same thing again with Ushabti Bone. Now you're going to find some of these guys have got capes and stuff that are very prominently visible from the front, and honestly those are going to be probably the ones that are easier to paint because, if you can see it, you can reach it with a brush. Don't worry too much again if this isn't perfect, and we are going to end up going over some of the smaller details, but don't worry, we are going to fix this up later. It's part of the reason of doing the cape sections first, is we can be quite messy with it. And then up to you. You see I've done the base, this beige colour too. You can do it red if you fancy. I just like a little bit of visible contrast from the back of the miniature. There we go. Now with that inside of his cape done, I've gone and put him on this painting handle. And yeah, man, I'm kind of into that. That's actually really easy to move around. So what I've got next, we'll do all the metal parts. And this is part of the reason why I like using a brown, because I tend to figure, these guys who are out in the field, there's got to be a hierarchy of who gets repairs first, First of all, with the Skitarii, you've got the Titan legions out there with them. They're definitely top of the line as far as repair priority goes. But after a while, once you've done all the vehicles and all that sort of stuff, then you've probably got to go down to the bottom of the pile to reach the Skitarii getting their time in the repair bays. So I figure a little bit of brown in the recesses isn't going to look amiss on these guys. So let's just go around now. We'll fill in all of the metal, and I mean anything that's going to be brass or gold later. With the exception, I'm not going to paint the gold on his gun with anything yet. But everything else that will be metal, let's hit it with some bolt gun metal. Leadbelcher. Geez, I've been a real old fart lately. I cannot get the old paint names out of my head. I was going to be yelling about Rakarth Red earlier, so forgive your old Uncle Sledge here. You're getting on some. Let's just go around now, though. I'll finish this off, and let's have a look once we've got all our little metal dealy boppers done. Now, with all the metallics sorted out, it's time to get on and finally put some red on them. Now, you can use Mephiston Red for this, but I'm going to switch to VALLEJO's Flat Red. And the reason for this is largely speed. Mephiston Red will go on very smoothly, especially over this nice brown undercoat. But what I want is something that'll go on in one coat. Do the job, and just be fine. Okay, so I'm using VALLEJO because it looks like that. Okay, when it dries, it'll be nice and smooth, ready for a shade and a highlight. Mephiston Red I would probably end up doing a second coat of. So let's just go around now. Oh, I've caught the underside of his cape there. Okay. Oh, well, that's not too hard to fix. I can just hit that with a little Ushabti Bone in a minute. But you see how easy this is. Just filling in the red areas. And you see it's a little difficult to sort of show off the real benefit of the painting handle when I've got to I've got to tilt it towards the camera. But when I was putting on the metallic stuff, it was actually really nice to be able to just turn it like so. But let's just come back once we've got all this red on. We'll see how that looks. Now red's done, and I've tidied up those little bits of Ushabti Bone where I went over with the red. Didn't take too long. That is one coat of red. It is magic stuff. Now I've got another little trick that I wanted to show you, which I'd stumbled across, called VALLEJO Wood Grain. Now if you've ever painted with the Citadels like Soulstone Blue or Waywatcher Green, those technical paints that are kind of gloopy and they work for gems, wood grain is very similar. It's this really thick, glutinous nonsense, and I'm just going to paint it all over the gun, even the areas that are going to be gold later, because this actually serves as a really good base coat for those. Now it helps if you use a bigger brush, And like I said, you can just be really generous with this and chuck it everywhere it needs to be. This is going straight over our base coat. So I'm going to finish that off. And we'll give that about 10 minutes or so to dry, because you do want it to be firm and fixed by the time you do anything else with it. So let's finish this off. God, I love this stuff. This was such a fluke discovery too. Like, I was actually picking this up for some World War II guns, but it just turned out to be a little too dark for what I had in mind there. Then along come the Skitarii with their lovely dark deep brown rifles, and this stuff just works the business. So let's come back to that when that's dry. You'll see what I mean. Now with that brown gunk dried, you see how good it is at just faking out that gold effect. Gold? Wood. Goodness me, I've got gold on the brain. So I've got my Retributor Armour here, and let's just quickly batter in the slightly smaller brush into these gold details. The beautiful stuff about this wood thing is that it also works pretty well as a base coat for gold. Now, as well, some folks like to do these bits, like the ridges on the armor, in gold as well. I'm going to skip that. I want to save time where I can, and I'm not a huge fan of the look anyway, so that's just how I look at it. But any other gold bits you want to do, particularly if you're doing Vanguard, this can be a cool spot to sort of brighten up their helmets a little bit. But I'm just going to finish this off now, and then we'll do some brass. And now I've got my Balthazar Gold, just to do some brass plates. Now, particularly on the Vanguard, they've got layered shoulder pads, which have normally 2 or 3 sort of plates to them. They look quite cool if you pick one of those out in brass. Let's just do his knee pad here. Anyway, you want to add just a little bit of visual interest, but without sort of overpowering the miniature. I got to admit, the more I use this thing, I'm really into this this little turny ability this paint handle has. This is a really comfy to use. So you see, I'm not putting too much of this on, honestly. This is really just a bit of colour. Now I am actually. Yeah, just dot in a little bit there. You can do these backpack dials and what have you as you like. I'm going to leave them because by the time we've shaded over them a couple of times, you're not going to see much of that, what do you call it, that little bit of detail in the recesses of that screen. And let's just put a little bit of brass up on his faceplate here, just to break up all of that silver we've got around the face. Now I've got a little bit of, this is VALLEJO Black Grey, and this is really handy if you want a black that you don't have to do a lot of work with. You'll notice when it goes on, it's very similar to Eshin Grey from Citadel, so if you've got that, you can use this in the very same way. But all I'm going to do is fill in all of the clothing and sort of metal bits, sorry, leather bits that I want to be black. I am going to do some cables and stuff proper black later. But for this stage, you'll see it goes on very smoothly, very quickly, and that's what we want. Speed is the key. Then just a little bit of VALLEJO Black, and we'll fill in all of the cables. Now if you want to, you can get, what are some good colours? Something like Corn Red or Screamer Pink or what have you, but I think you're just going to add more work where it doesn't need to be done. Alright, any of these little cabled areas, these little rubberized sheets, just paint them in black and it'll add just enough contrast that they look like, you know, they've been put in some sort of cable sheathing. It does not require a huge amount of effort. So I'm just going to quickly whip around and fill those in. And then, because I forgot to earlier, I'm going to fill in his purity seals with some, what is this? Rakarth Flesh and a little bit of Screamer Pink, but that doesn't take too much. Now finally, before we go to our shades, if you're a little messy like me, you may have hit some of this leather stuff on his backpack with some silver while you were painting it. If you need to touch this up, just a little bit of Skrag Brown is actually really close to fur brown. So just touch in some areas with that if you need to, and once it's shaded, you won't see the difference. Now with all of those base coats finally done, it's time for my favourite. If you've been around for any stretch of time, you know how much I like my Agrax Earthshade. And this is no different. Grab yourself your shade brush, and we're going to be quite generous with this over the whole model. Except when you come time to do the coat itself, just brush down, and anywhere you see it collecting, you can just sort of drag it away, because you just want to change the color a little bit. You don't want these big gloopy, marks down the bottom, except in some of the recesses. So move that around while it's still wet, and you'll see you very quickly get to fix that. I got some brown in the wrong spot there. Not to mind. We'll be able to fix that up with a highlight. Just cruise around now, and the whole model with Agrax Earthshade. Now, what a difference a shade makes. What we'll do now is exactly the same thing. We've got Nuln Oil, and we'll do this over all of the metal and the black details. You don't have to be particularly careful with this, but just use it as a way. We're going to introduce a lot more depth and contrast into this metal. So, let's just fill this in now. And it's worth pointing out while I do this, that this will work perfectly well if you are doing, say, Forge World Riser. Fur Brown actually works really well as a undercoat for orange, or you could use the VALLEJO Orange if you fancied. Have a look if there's anything in that route that you like the look of. But Fur Brown, I actually really like it, so do pick it up. It's dead handy. And same as this doodad, this painting handle. I'm loving this. So top marks so far, and we'll just finish off all of this metal. Now once that black shade is dried, beautiful. I love that depth of shading. Really helps sell the depth of the metal. I think it looks really cool. Now as well, I do want to point out, you've probably heard the horror stories of somebody putting their brush in their cup of tea. But I'll tell you there's an easy way to get around it. My paint pot's always on my right side because I'm right-handed. So just put your tea on the left. Swap it if you happen to be left-handed. Easy as that. Now I've got Squig Orange. I'm going to use this to highlight our red. We're not going to need very much of it. If you wanted a slightly richer red, you could use even Rakarth Flesh. And then once you've done your highlights, go over with a red glaze. But for this, I'm quite happy. So just a little bit on the edges of detail on the sleeve there. You don't have to go crazy with this. You can add as much or as little as you like. I like quite a bit, to be honest. Now if you're feeling it, you might want to highlight the black, in which case a little bit of Dawnstone will help sell the depth of that black that we've got going. Just a little bit on some of the higher points, just to give the impression of those creases. I tend not to do this for my bulk infantry, but just so you can see, how it looks nice and easy. Now with a little Flayed One Flesh and some pink horror, I'm going to highlight his, too much paint there, highlight his purity seals. And you don't need to do very much to these. And then we can get into highlighting the metal. Now I've got Ironbreaker here because I don't want a huge real shine to it. I just want it to look slightly cleaner in some areas. I recommend that you don't go too overboard with these highlights because you do want to keep a fair amount of contrast. But for example, here where I messed up earlier, it's gone. You saw nothing. What I'm going to do is just pick out a couple of areas where I want that shine. So anything that you think is going to look better for being a bit brighter and maybe a little more carefully maintained, it's up to you. Just pop a little bit of Ironbreaker on there now, and it will look smashing. The last thing we're going to touch up is going to be his eyes, and there is a really cool way, nice and quickly, that you can get a neat sort of glow effect there. What I'm going to do is carefully boop in a little dot of white in the center of each lens. If I go overboard, that's not too much of an issue. You'll see why in a minute. Now to fix my little issue, all I did was run just a bit of Nuln Oil into the recess of the eye socket there, and then I touched it up with some white scar again. So it's easy to fix these little issues. Now what I've got is some Guilliman Blue glaze, and all I'm going to do is just touch very carefully bip, onto bip, the lens. And there we have it. Glowing blue eyes. Oh, I should probably do the little thing on his shoulder too. So with those last couple of little details done, and the Crux Mechanicus on his chest, white side is the right-hand side of the skull, and then vice versa on the cog behind it, he's done. And that is all really simple stuff. Shades, a single highlight, okay? There's no dry brushing, but I think just the lines on this guy, it's better served with just a couple of sharp highlights. You might want to try dry brushing the red robes though, if you like the look of that. And I gotta say, I'm really pleased with this little doofer here. So Redgrass Games, they've got a Kickstarter coming for a production version of this in January, so keep your eyes open for that, guys, because I've actually really enjoyed using this one. What we'll do now, though, I'll quickly pop a base on him. I'm going to use Iron Crust, Martian Iron Crust, the thicker one. Then I'm going to hit it with some Agrax Earthshade and give it a quick dry brush over the top. We'll see how that looks once that's done. With those steps for his base done, our Skitarii Ranger is complete, and I'm actually pretty pleased with how he turns out. You could go ahead and drop another red over the coat if you wanted a slightly different, more vibrant red. If you wanted to put Mephiston Red. Goodness me, what is with me today? All these old paints. Anyway, you could put down Mephiston Red over the top of the flat red from Vallejo if you wanted that slightly more rich colour. Or just give it a red glaze. I don't think you necessarily have to bother highlighting everything, so I've skipped out the backpack, for example. I haven't done any highlights on his gun, but we're painting bulk infantry for an army. And if I just quickly grab the others that I've painted, pop them down like that, and okay, it's not particularly inspiring with just 3, but hey, maybe you want to paint a kill team. As well, I just want to give another quick shout out to Redgrass Games, the guys behind this clever little doofer here. I am really looking forward to the release of these. I think this is a great little tool, and it genuinely surprised me how much of a difference that little pivot at the top there made. I'll link them down in the description too. They are also the team behind the Everlasting Wet Palette, which I've heard good things about. Maybe you want to check that out too. As well, I'm going to drop so many links on you this week, so I do apologise if you've got a lot to read. Check out Tale of More Warlords over on Twitter, and I'll link to the info post down there too, on my blog. Yeah, I've got one of those happening too. Geez, everything is kicking off now. But hopefully, guys, something there was interesting to you. Like I mentioned, we have already done one of these Skitarii Rangers, but it doesn't hurt to look at alternate methods, and especially this wood grain stuff, alternate ways of doing, how can we be faster? So as ever, thank you very much for your time, guys. You enjoy the rest of your day.